I discovered my wife was cheating and humiliating me. What happened next will surprise you. I don't even know how to begin writing this, but I need to get it out before it explodes. It feels like it all happened yesterday. My name is Marcio. I'm 38 years old, and I'm a mechanic. I've always been a simple guy, never ashamed of my work. I built my workshop with my own hands, piece by piece, with a lot of effort. Each car I repaired was a brick in this life I always thought was solid. I woke up early, went to work, and came back tired, but happy to be building something for myself and my family. I believed that was enough, that all it took was love and hard work to earn respect. But what I experienced showed me that sometimes the world doesn't work that way. One day I noticed that Sarah, my wife, was different. Small comments, sidelong glances, clothes too new for our reality. At first I tried to ignore it. I thought it was a phase, stress, whatever. But the feeling of being judged in my own home grew. It's a pain that only those who have experienced it understand. It's not just jealousy. It's a kind of silent humiliation, the kind that makes you feel small in the place that should be your refuge. It was as if every smile she had was fake, as if she were looking at me and seeing a stranger. The final straw happened so mundanely that I still remember the smell of the moment. It was a hot afternoon. I'd just gotten back from the garage and went to get a glass of water. Her phone was on the table charging. A message vibrated, and I can't explain it. My hand was quicker than my reasoning. I opened it, and there it was. It wasn't just any message, it was an audio message. She was laughing, talking about her poor husband, saying she was going to get rid of me. And she wasn't alone in this conversation. It was with another man, Mark. Each word was like a knife stab. The kitchen seemed to spin. I felt heat rising in my face, my hands trembling. I sat on the floor, leaning against the wall, trying to understand if this was real. The world went silent for a moment, only that audio echoed inside my head. I read and reread the messages, listened to the audio messages again, as if trying to find a loophole, an excuse, anything that would make me believe it wasn't true. But it was. The woman sleeping next to me, who claimed to love me, was humiliating me behind my back, turning me into a laughing stock. I felt a shame I'd never felt in my life. It was as if I was smaller than a grain of sand. I sat there, I think, for hours. Time lost its meaning. It was a mixture of anger, sadness, despair, and a new feeling, uselessness. I asked myself 1,000 times where I had gone wrong. If I had been too stupid, too naive, if working so hard had made me miss out on something she needed. With each question, another wave of pain hit me. I staggered to my feet and went to the workshop, because it was the only place where I still felt like myself. I sat on the bench where I usually rested, looking at the tools, the cars, the oil-stained floor that had always been a source of pride. But in that moment, everything seemed meaningless. It was as if my entire life were a lie. I thought about screaming, breaking everything, but all I could do was cry. I had never cried like that, a heavy cry that comes from deep within the stomach. Then I realized I was at rock bottom, and yet something inside me, a shred of dignity, told me I couldn't stay there forever. It was a small spark, but it was mine. The next day, I woke up without having slept. My face was swollen, my body heavy. Sarah had already left. I didn't even know how to look at her. Every step inside the house felt strange, as if it were an unfamiliar place. But along with the despair came a clarity. I wouldn't accept being destroyed. I wouldn't let them strip me of the little dignity I had left. That's when I remembered a friend who had told me about Dr. Henrique, a lawyer known for being fair and straightforward. I picked up the phone with trembling hands and called. I told him everything, or at least I tried. My voice cracked. It sounded like I was confessing to a crime, when in fact I was the victim. He listened patiently and told me to come to his office that same day. That call was my first step. It seemed small, but it was huge. It was the first time I chose to act, not just react. Arriving at Dr. Henrique's office, I was still shaking. He greeted me calmly, looked me in the eye, and told me I needed to breathe. I explained every detail. I showed him the messages, the audio recordings, everything. He was direct. We needed to organize the evidence, show the truth. It wasn't just about winning a case, it was about regaining my dignity. When he said this, something inside me stirred. I'd spent the night feeling like crap, but there, listening to him speak, I began to feel a spark of hope. For the first time, I felt like maybe I wasn't the failure she'd led me to believe I was. I left that office still wounded, but with a plan. And at that moment, having a plan was all I needed. I left Dr. Henrique's office with the papers in my hands and my head spinning. It wasn't just a lawsuit, it was my life, my marriage, my name that were at stake. I got in my car and went straight to the shop, as if returning to a safe haven, but nothing felt the same. The smell of oil, the noise of the cars, everything was different. It was as if I were seeing my life from the outside, like a stranger. I sat on the reception bench for a while, staring at my greasy hands that had built everything and yet were being ridiculed. I remembered the audio of her saying, "Poor husband," and it burned inside me. I wondered how anyone could sleep soundly after saying something like that about someone who only tried their best. But at the same time, I began to realize that the pain was turning into something else. It was as if I was transforming shame into anger, anger into energy. I had one goal now, to prove the truth. Not to her, not to Mark, but to myself. It was my dignity that was at stake. I knew the road would be long and difficult, but inside me a voice said, "You are not the trash," she said. And that voice, though small, began to grow. I started gathering everything, messages, audios, dates, times. I spent hours organizing every detail, printing conversations, saving files. It was painful work. Each screenshot I took was a new stab, a reminder that the woman I loved saw me as a hindrance, but it was necessary. Dr. Henrique explained to me that the trial would be difficult, that she might try to twist the story, play the victim, use everything against me. This possibility left me tense, my stomach churning. I couldn't sleep well, dreaming of her laughing at me in court, telling me I was making it all up. I woke up sweaty, nervous, but I kept going. Each night awake was another piece of my body struggling. I was tired, but for the first time, the tiredness had a meaning. It wasn't just working to pay the bills, it was working to reclaim who I was. And that gave me a strange strength, an energy I didn't even know I had. The worst part was pretending to be normal at home. Every time she arrived, every time she looked at me, I felt a knot in my stomach. She didn't know I'd already figured it all out. Sometimes she smiled, sometimes she complained, sometimes she acted as if nothing was happening. And there I was, silent, planning. It was a theater that consumed me. I thought about exploding, throwing everything in her face, but Dr. Henrique advised me to wait, not to show that I knew. It was to gather more evidence so that there would be no doubt in court. This wait was one of the most painful things in my life. Sleeping next to someone who stabbed you in the back is like sleeping with an enemy. Her scent, which once soothed me, now sickened me. Every gesture seemed false. Every word seemed rehearsed. I felt like a prisoner in my own home, counting the days until I could be free. Meanwhile, the shop became my refuge and my battlefield at the same time. I spent more time there than ever before. I worked late, not because I had more work, but because I couldn't stand being home. Every customer who came in was a temporary relief. Every car fixed was a way to prove to myself that I still had value. But inside, I was broken. I remember one specific day when a customer complimented my work and said, "You're an honest man. It's a pleasure to bring your car here." In that moment, I held back tears. It was a simple sentence, but it was like a reminder of who I really am. I'm not the trash she called me. I'm not the poor husband she ridiculed. I'm a man who built everything on his own, with sweat, without stepping on anyone. And I was going to use that truth to lift me up. When the day of the hearing finally arrived, I was a wreck inside. But outwardly I tried to hold myself together. I put on my best shirt, the one I wore to my nephew's baptism, because I wanted to show myself respect. I walked into the courtroom, my legs shaking. My heart felt like it was about to burst out of my chest. Sarah was there, sitting next to her lawyer, and so was Mark, with that look of superiority. I looked at them and felt a mixture of anger and pity. It was as if I was seeing people I didn't know. Dr. Henrique played the audio for the judge to hear. With every word, with every laugh she'd made public, I felt my heart slowly rebuild. It wasn't pleasure. It wasn't revenge. It was as if, finally, the truth was breathing. The feeling of hearing everything revealed in court was surreal. Her every laugh, every cruel comment pounded in my head like a heavy drum. For a few seconds, I nearly fainted with relief and rage at the same time. No one needed to convince me that I had been humiliated. The whole world was watching. The judge, calm and firm, listened to everything, analyzing every detail. And even with the weight of shame, I felt a clarity I hadn't felt in months. The truth was on my side. This wasn't a tale of revenge, it was justice. And this gave me strength I hadn't known existed. I felt my chest open, as if I could finally breathe without fear. For the first time, I realized that the pain that consumed me could be transformed into something powerful, something that made me bigger, stronger. I looked at Dr. Henrique and saw confidence in his eyes, and that comforted me. He gave me security when I felt like everything could fall apart. When the judge began speaking, saying that all the evidence was clear, that the audio recordings left no doubt about her intentions, I felt a huge weight lift from my shoulders. For months, I'd carried shame, humiliation, and fear, and here it was all being acknowledged. Every tear I'd shed, every sleepless night, every time I'd sat alone in the workshop feeling useless, was worth it. The feeling of justice wasn't just moral, it was physical. I felt my shoulders relax, the knot in my stomach disappear, a kind of relief I hadn't felt since the day I discovered the betrayal. I could finally look forward without feeling diminished. This victory wasn't about Sarah or Mark, it was about me. About proving that I had value, that my life, my dignity, couldn't be ripped away by someone who only wanted to take advantage of me. The moment I heard the sentence was strange. I stood there, feeling my heart pound, when the judge confirmed that I had the right to dignity, justice, and that the humiliation I had suffered would not go unpunished. I felt a mixture of tears and relief that I can't describe. It wasn't an explosion of happiness. It was a deeper feeling, recognition that I exist, that my life matters, that my hands, my choices, my story are no less important than anyone else's. I thought about all the days I cried alone in the workshop, all the times I thought about giving up, and I felt a growing strength. For the first time in months, I smiled inside without guilt. I didn't need to prove anything to her or to Mark, but I did need to prove it to myself. And I did. After the hearing, I returned to the workshop. Everything looked the same, but I knew I had changed. Every tool, every car, every smell of grease had a new meaning. Before they were just work tools. Now they were symbols of my strength, my perseverance. I sat down on the bench, took a deep breath, and felt life returning. The fatigue was still there, but mixed with pride and clarity. I spent the afternoon organizing the workshop, thinking about the next steps, about my life, about what I wanted for myself. The pain was still there, but it no longer defined me. I was in control, and that was liberating. That night, at home, alone with my thoughts, I realized I was different. I no longer felt afraid of Sarah. I no longer felt ashamed, only a mixture of relief, strength, and hope. I looked at my reflection in the mirror and saw a man who survived, who didn't let himself be broken. There was still pain, of course. Betrayal doesn't disappear overnight, but something had changed. I was no longer the victim. I was the survivor, and that in itself was a huge victory. For the first time, I felt I could look forward without fear, without feeling like I had to hide my life or my choices. I could be myself, without excuses, without shame, without anyone putting me down. And that was liberating. In the days that followed, I began to feel a strange mixture of freedom and responsibility. The freedom of no longer being weighed down by humiliation, lies, and contempt, but also the responsibility of truly rebuilding my life with my own hands, without anyone diminishing my worth. Each morning, when I entered the workshop, I felt like I was starting over, not as before, because nothing is ever the same again, but as someone who has learned to fight and stand firm. The silence of the workshop became my ally. I spent hours there, organizing tools, fixing cars, but mostly reflecting on who I am and what I deserve. I remembered every night I spent crying alone, every early morning I spent thinking about giving up, and I felt that each of those nights had prepared me for this moment. The sense of strength I carried was unlike any previous pride. It wasn't just about the work, it was about what I had survived, what I had achieved within myself. The strangest feeling was realizing that the pain wasn't over, but that I'd learned to live with it without breaking down. I still remember the messages and audios, the cruel words, the contempt etched in her every gesture. They came to mind from time to time, but now they didn't paralyze me. On the contrary, they strengthened me. I realized the true strength doesn't come from ignoring pain, but from facing it and standing tall. I began writing down my ideas, organizing my work routine, taking care of myself. And, little by little, hope returned. The hope that life could be different, that I could love again. But first, I needed to respect myself. Every small victory, like fixing a complicated car or completing a renovation at the workshop, gave me a sense of power over my own life that I'd never felt before. Over time, I also began to realize that some relationships had changed. Friends who had stuck by me became even more important, and those who had drifted away showed their true colors. I learned not to care about what I couldn't control, especially the opinions of those who had despised me. Sarah and Mark became just part of a painful past, one I carried, but which could no longer define my future. I began to value every gesture of honesty and friendship, every person who treated me with respect. And suddenly, I felt lighter, more secure. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone, only to myself. And that was enough. I began to believe again in my worth, in my ability to build, to love, to live with dignity. It was during this period that I understood something fundamental. Overcoming pain isn't about erasing it, it's about learning from it. Every sleepless night, every tear shed, every feeling of failure taught me something. It taught me that I can endure more than I imagined, that my life doesn't depend on anyone's approval, and that self-love is the foundation of everything. I started to take better care of myself, to pay attention to myself, to what I truly want. Working in the workshop became not only a source of income, but a refuge, a constant reminder that I built my life alone and can rebuild it whenever necessary. The feeling of rebuilding was so powerful that it made me proud of every step I took, even the most painful ones. Looking back today, I realize that that day in court changed everything, not only because of the public acknowledgement of the truth, but because of what it taught me about myself. I discovered that I can face anything, that pain doesn't have to defeat me, and that I can create my own happiness, regardless of who's by my side. The humiliation I carried turned into strength, shame turned into courage, and sadness turned into clarity. I still feel remnants of that pain, but no longer as a burden, but as a reminder that I survived and became stronger. Every morning I wake up, I feel I can live again, with dignity, with hope, and with the will to build something of my own. In the days that followed, I began to realize that my life was changing from the inside out. The pain was still there, but it no longer paralyzed me. Each morning was a reminder that I had survived, that my strength depended on no one but myself. I began to plan small things I hadn't thought of before, renovating the workshop, learning new techniques, organizing my routine in a way that made me feel useful and complete. The bad memories still came, of course, but I wasn't afraid of them. I felt like I was learning, and that was liberating. For the first time, I realized that my story didn't need to be defined by what someone did wrong to me, but by what I chose to do next. Little by little, my relationship with myself began to change. I began to value myself more, to recognize my achievements, my abilities, and my strength. I realized that true victory wasn't in humiliating those who had wronged me, nor in proving anything to others. It was in reclaiming my life, my dignity, my right to feel complete. I began to invest more in myself, in my work, in the people who truly mattered, and in everything that made me feel alive. Each day was a new opportunity to prove to myself that I was stronger than the pain I carried. One of the most defining moments of this phase was realizing I no longer needed to hide my feelings. I cried when I needed to, took deep breaths when I was nervous, and celebrated every small victory. The pride of simply existing and moving forward, despite everything, became a silent force that accompanied me every day. I understood that overcoming doesn't mean forgetting, but learning to live with the pain without letting it define me. Every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of despair contributed to my reconstruction. Today, I still feel the scars. They're here, inside me, as a reminder of everything I've experienced and overcome. But I no longer feel ashamed. I no longer feel afraid. I no longer feel like my life depends on anyone's approval. What happened transformed me. It taught me that I can fight and win, even when everything seems lost. That I can build my own happiness and dignity, even if someone tries to destroy them. That I can feel whole and strong without needing to prove anything to anyone. And that, above all, my life is worth the effort I make to protect and respect it. If I could give one piece of advice to someone going through something similar, it would be, don't let yourself be destroyed by someone else's contempt. The pain exists, the humiliation exists, but so does overcoming it. Every step, no matter how small, counts. I lived through one of the cruelest moments of my life, but I survived, got back up, and learned that my strength doesn't depend on anyone but me. Today, I can look ahead, take a deep breath, and feel that my life is mine. That my choices, my work, my effort, and my dignity cannot be taken away. I learned to live again, with hope, courage, and self-love. And that's what I want to remain, the certainty that it's possible to rise again, even when all seems lost.